Dear President of Rotary International, Mr. Holger Knack, senior members of Rotary, Organizing Committee of the Centennial in Africa celebration, Organizing Committee for this event, honorable members of government, fellow diplomats, Rotarians, dear friends, caros amigos e amigas. I am Manuel Carvalho, the Ambassador of Portugal in South Africa. I'm honored and thankful for the occasion of addressing this August celebration, marking 1 century in Africa of one of the world's paramount associations and philanthropies. Rotarians have been a force for good in the world for over a century, starting from relatively modest beginnings in Chicago in 1905. But Rotary International didn't stay there. It grew into a multi-continental presence that congregates goodwill and tries to make things better around the world. And it looks into the future. It's a big part of that future that begins on the 1st of July, when protecting the environment becomes one of the official focus areas for the Rotary movement. This priority matches with our own concerns as a country and as current presidency of the Council of the European Union. Our motto for this semester is time to act for a just, digital and green recovery. From our side, and in good coordination with the presidency's trio, that is Germany, Portugal and Slovenia, and with the EU institutions, we have 3 main priorities. Promoting a European recovery leveraged by the climate and digital transitions, delivering on the social pillar of the European Union as a key element to ensure a fair and inclusive climate and digital transition, strengthening the strategic autonomy of Europe that is open to the world. And these priorities will be developed through 5 action lines: resilient Europe, fostering recovery, cohesion, and European values. 2, green Europe, promoting the EU as a leader in climate action. I'll be back to this. Digital Europe, accelerating the digital transformation at the service of citizens and businesses. 4th, social Europe, enhancing and strengthening the European social model. And 5, global Europe, promoting a Europe that is open to the world. Focusing on the latter, we want to reinforce the presence of the EU in the world, promoting multilateralism and strengthening our global partnerships with Africa, Asia, and the transatlantic space. Africa is once again, a cross-cutting priority, as it was with all our previous presidencies. We understand that with the current treaty provisions, the execution of external relations are purview of the various institutions, the European Council, Commission, External Action Service, but the contents still must come from the various council formations. Therefore, the African focus appears not only on the external relations chapter, but also in the various sectoral stands in the Portuguese presidency mandate. This includes topics to address global challenges, be they peace and security, energy transition, trade, population flows, or health crisis, such as the one we are currently facing. More specifically, the detailed presidency program includes not less than 32 references to Africa, including topics such as intercontinental submarine IT links, security, energy transition, green transition, trade, population movements, health crisis, the future of the African private sector, jobs creation in Africa, climate change, finalization of the post-Cotonou EU ACP agreement, judiciary cooperation, combating brain drain from Africa, cooperating in higher education and research, including outer space, sports, economic recovery in medium-low income countries, looking for mutually beneficial opportunities in climate change, economic cooperation, inclusive and sustainable trade and investment, energy, stability in North Africa, transition from low development country to middle income, assistance to the African Continental Free Trade Area, accession of Angola to the SADC Economic Partnership Agreement, or the EU-Angola Investment Facilitation Agreement, but also defense and security missions, including Sahel in the Gulf of Guinea, or co-organizing with the High Representative for Foreign Security Policy, the ministerial meeting with the African partners on peace and security. As a specific initiative, Portugal has organized with the European Investment Bank, the EIB, the EU-Africa High-Level Forum on the Green Economy and Investment in Lisbon and online on hybrid format on the 23rd of April. Green and growth were often seen as contradictory notions in the past, but green growth is precisely what the future is demanding in Africa too. How to move in that direction must be at the center of a crucial discussion for Africa, for Europe, and for the world at large. At high-level forum, we had my Prime Minister, also with the President of the EIB, but also the UN Secretary General and representatives of African governments, the European Commission, the AU, the African Development Bank, and Mr. Mo Ibrahim, founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and co-founder of the Africa-Europe Foundation. The EU-Africa High-Level Forum was preceded by an intercontinental dialogue based on a series of events that we call the Green Talks. Those Green Talks took place in Africa and in Europe and constitute an unprecedented month-long dialogue in over 20 locations in Europe and in Africa, in places like Dakar, Harare, Cairo, Addis, São Tomé, Luanda, Algiers, Pretoria, Abuja, Nairobi, Tunis, Maputo, Rabat. In South Africa, the Green Talk focused on manufacturing in Africa for Africa and inserting this under the notion of opportunities in sustainable and inclusive manufacturing in South and Southern Africa. Africa needs to create jobs to insert itself in the global value chains. But if Africa needs to create for itself a new economy, it will have to do it in tune with the realities of the 21st century, including concepts like sustainability, limited carbon footprint, and limited wastage. The climate challenges, of course, aren't only an African issue. That is why the climate imperative is covered in many other dimensions of the Portuguese presidency and of the work of the EU institutions. The most important piece of legislation is indeed the European Climate Law that seeks to implement the Europe-wide goals of climate neutrality by 2050. It's a commitment that was obtained under the German presidency in December 2020 and is now going to be made into law with this European Climate Law. This covers a legally binding commitment to zero greenhouse gases emission until 2050 across all sectors, an intermediate net reduction target of 55% until 2030, and the legislative adjustments and action plans to achieve those goals, and a trajectory to arrive at that goal by 2050. I'm happy to note that the Rotary International Movement is joining forces in this endeavor. Let me share a bit of my life. I grew up by my country's southern coast, just a few hundred kilometers from the shores of Africa. We enjoy a pleasant climate that has been becoming warmer with occasional freaky episodes. In my first 30 years, heat waves were a rarity. I remember a big one on that given day in June 1983. In the second half of my life, since 1990, heat waves became an annual phenomenon. Forest fires grew in size and intensity. The 5 warmest of the past 150 years were all after 1997. Average temperature in Portugal was 14.7 centigrade in 1960 when I was born, but it rose to 16.3 in 2017. Much bigger forest fires are a consequence. The worst years in burnt area have steadily become worse at each decade. Erratic events are one of the hallmarks of climate change. And it's not only in Portugal. For example, California had its worst forest fires in 2020, while reaching temperature records having come to 54.4 centigrade that NASA described as part of a long-term trend and probably the highest temperature on record. Australia also recorded in 2019 as its hottest year and 2020 as the worst in wildfires, with 11 million hectares burnt. But then we also saw a few weeks ago the horrific floods, freaky phenomena. And I could go on. So it's urgent combating climate change, slowing down and stopping global warming, cutting CO2 emissions, and defining a sustainable energy generation and consumption path, and adapting our economies and societies to greener ways. Africa can and must be part of this. Despite contributing only 4% of the total global emissions, this is a continent that has its own vulnerabilities in view of extreme climate phenomena, and that in parts of the continent lacks the administrative and governance tools to protect its populations from their consequences. Over the past few years, the policies pursued in the EU have allowed a reduction of greenhouse gases emissions of around 24% in 2020 compared to those of 1990. The objectives for the future used to aim at reducing emissions by 45% in 2030 and by 60% in 2050. But these goals were not sufficient. They have been ramped up last December when the EU target until 2030 was reset for 55% emission reduction compared to 1990, and in view of climate neutrality by 2050. My country was the first in the world to assume, back in 2016 in Marrakesh, the goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. In May that year, Portugal ran for 4 consecutive days on renewables alone. Since 2005, we reduced greenhouse gas emissions by about 22%. With the additional measures in the current National Energy and Climate Plan, we should attain 45% to 55% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. Portugal aims for 47% of renewables in the final energy consumption, and at least 80% of renewables in the electricity generation. We are regularly above 50% by now. A big international operator wrote this. In 2018, the country, Portugal, achieved an exceptional result with few equals around the world. The electricity produced from renewables in the month of March 2018 exceeded the energy consumed in the country during the same period. And last month, or at the beginning of this year, in January, renewables in electricity generation was 71.2%. And in November 2021, we'll close the last coal power plant in the country. I believe we'll be the very first EU member to definitely exclude coal from its energy mix. The direction is totally clear. Coming back to Africa, the abundant renewable resources in this continent provide the basis for the development of a cleaner, continent-centered, sustainable way of generating energy. This is wealth for Africa. This potential, coupled with the fact that renewable energy is now cost competitive with fossil fuels, led to more countries assuming ambitious renewable energy plans. If I'm not wrong, Egypt committed to source 42% of its total electricity from renewables by 2035, and Morocco set its renewable energy target at 52% by 2030. And coming back to South Africa, according to a 2020 IFC study, South Africa is one of the 16 African countries that technically could have wind potentials of over 1 terawatt. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was Portuguese Prime Minister as we were launching our reflection on our future greening plans. Recall a few months ago at his Nelson Mandela lecture in July 2020 that we are in danger of a two-speed world. By 2050, we estimate that accelerating climate change will affect millions of people through malnutrition, malaria, and other diseases, migration, and extreme weather events. The green economy will be a new source of prosperity and employment, but let us not forget that some people will lose their jobs, particularly in the post-industrial rust belts of our world. That's why I welcome the occasion of having shared these thoughts with the members of Rotary, and I'd like to encourage the conversation to continue. We are celebrating a centennial today, and there is no better way to honor the past than to prepare for the future with Rotary. Thank you very much. Siabonga, Baidanki, muito obrigado. Thank you very much.